don't lose faith, you got this, but be prepared for other people to not understand or just be indoctrinated in their own personal beliefs about college, which you and I know not to be true. Hello. So I never went to college, but in less than 3 years, I was able to get a six-figure tech salary and move to New York City, which is one of, if not the most expensive city in the world. So today I thought I would tell you a little bit about how I did it and how you can do it too. Basically, there are two paths you can take if you've just graduated high school and you're looking to get a six-figure salary. And the best analogy I could come up with is a biology analogy, K-selected species and R-selected species. Now, I'm not a biologist and these concepts are really complicated, but for the sake of this analogy, what I mean by K-selected and R-selected is in the context of how they raise their young. So R-selected species usually have lots of offsprings and they don't really take care of them, whereas K-selected species have one offspring that has a really long rearing period. So I thought this analogy might work to describe the two different paths that you can take from a high school degree to a six-figure salary for a few reasons. As kind of a high-level overview, the R-selected path is much more empirical, so it's kind of spray and pray, throw darts and see where they land, whereas the K-selected path is much more intentional, much more backdoor-ish. And throughout this video, I'm going to break those concepts down further, as well as their pros and cons of each. So starting with the R-selected path, this is personally the one that I took that works best for me, so that's why I'm starting with it. As I mentioned, this path is much more empirical, much more incremental, but what does that mean more tangibly? Well, the first thing is you're going to want to diversify your resume. So what that meant for me was having multiple jobs. I had 0 job experience graduating high school, and in the first 8 months that I was in the workforce, I think I had 4 or 5 jobs. And then the other thing that I was doing to try to diversify my resume was learning multiple skills that I thought might be relevant to a corporate job. So at that time, I was taking a lot of online courses in Python, in project management, in UX design. There wasn't really a common thread in any of those, and to be totally honest, I hated most of those things, if not all of them. But I was learning in my spare time so that I could put those skills on my resume and hopefully improve my chances of getting a corporate job at some point. But as you can see, I didn't really have a concrete direction, and I was just hedging my bets, which is exactly what R-selected species do, right? Now, along the same lines of, spraying and praying and just playing the numbers game, I applied to hundreds of jobs, and if you're gonna go this path, that's kind of what it entails. So I sent out tailored resumes, tailored cover letters to almost 200 different companies, and ultimately only one responded, but you only need one. And that's the one that ended up taking me across the finish line. And then the last kind of cornerstone to this track is to never say no to any opportunity. So for me, when I was working as a barista, one of my kind of regular customers came up to me and asked me if I would nanny her kids after school. And so that's how I got that second job. Now, sometimes that meant that I was working for cheap or for free, which wasn't ultimately very good for my personal well-being, but I have been given the feedback recently and in the past that kind of work ethic and mindset, it definitely resonates with some people and it absolutely opens doors. I definitely think that this path is kind of the boomer narrative where you just work hard and you'll be recognized eventually. And it worked for me, and I do believe that it still works in general, but as you can see, it might undervalue yourself and it definitely takes a lot of work. Which brings me into the pros and cons of going down the R-selected path. The first pro is that it's good if you don't know exactly what you want to do in life. So you'll gain a lot of exposure, you'll have a lot of fun, you're never really tethered down to one particular job. The second pro is that you make a lot of progress quickly. So within, I think, 1 or 2 months of me graduating high school, And when I had no job experience, I got my first job working at the pizzeria, right? So I went from broke to a little less broke, and then I ended up having 2 jobs at a time, which made me still not making a ton of money, but way better than 0. So I think during this time I went from making $0 a year to maybe 20 or 30K per year. And it also made me feel really good because I was always busy and I was always making progress. And the third pro to all of this is that it doesn't involve that much risk. It's kind of like flirting with a girl on a dating app as opposed to asking her out in person. It's definitely lower risk in that way because you're following the kind of conventional path and methods that people use to get jobs, and you're never really putting yourself fully out there like you would in the case-selected path, which I'll get to in a second. But there are a few cons to going down the R-selected path. First and foremost, it's extremely competitive. Like I just mentioned, you are following the conventional order of things in order to get a job. But when you follow that path, everybody else is following that path, especially if you were just a high school grad or you only have a high school degree. You're directly competing with people with college degrees or people with more work experience who are also applying, via LinkedIn or Indeed or any of these other job websites and following the conventional path also. The other con is that because it's extremely incremental, even though you always feel like you're making tangible progress and you always kind of have a job, it'll take a lot longer to reach $100,000. As I mentioned, it took me just under 3 years to make this happen. And so for the first year, I was probably making 20K. In the second year, I was probably making 60K. And then finally, in the third year, that's when I finally broke, the 6-figure club or 6-figure salary. But it can be done. Case in point, I highly vouch for this path. And I think that most people would probably prefer this path. But if you are so inclined, let's break down the case-selected path. The case-selected path can be thought of as the backdoor approach. It's much more intentional and much more risky, which comes with its own set of pros and cons. The first thing you want to do if you take the case-selected path is to research companies, not jobs. So whereas the R-selected person might go on Indeed or LinkedIn and see what job postings already exist, as a case-selected person, you're going to want to research companies that interest you and get to know who their CEO is or what their culture is like, and do a bunch of front-end work first to then, go to them either in person or reaching out by email or reaching out via basically a non-job application and asking them for a job that way. Now, when you reach out to these companies, as I mentioned, you're not going to submit a job application. Instead, you're going to go via an alternate method and you are going to tell them what you can offer them. So the case-selected path is definitely better for the person who already knows what they want or already has experience so that they know exactly what they're offering, what they're bringing to the table, and can prove their worth and their skills. And the easiest way to prove your worth and your skills to a potential employer is by already having a portfolio. Now, a portfolio is usually a website that showcases work that you've already done, either in high school or on your own, but you have to have tangible skills and experience that you can show your employer to back up your claim of, what you can offer them. So let's jump into the pros of taking a case-selected path. First of all, you'll reach $100,000 much faster because you're already offering skills that are valuing you higher than somebody who doesn't know exactly what they're bringing to the table. And you're going to ask for a higher salary while you're negotiating this job that doesn't exist yet, right? The R-selected people are applying to jobs that already exist, that have already pre-approved salary ranges, whereas you are creating your own opportunity, which means that you can create your own salary range. The other pro to this is that there's no competition. Almost nobody gets a job this way. Everybody follows the conventional path of applying on these job-seeking websites and submitting their resume and waiting for a callback, whereas you are going through the back door. So as somebody who only has a high school degree, you have no competition. It's literally just between you and your employer. Now, there are a few cons. First and foremost, you probably won't see progress for a very long time. or at least much longer than somebody who takes an R-selected path would. And that's because somebody who takes an R-selected path is going to say yes to every opportunity, is going to take multiple jobs, whereas you have to say no to every opportunity that doesn't meet your standards. And also, it's going to take you a lot more time to research these companies, have those negotiations, get one of these companies to like you. And the other con is that you're going to confront a lot more social disapproval. It's much more risky in the sense that while you are not making so much tangible progress for longer, you'll probably get pressure from parents or family or people around you to make tangible progress more quickly. And so you kind of have to have the fortitude to say and know that you are waiting for the right opportunity as opposed to just taking the scraps that you can get. And you also might get some direct disapproval, social disapproval from the employers. Whereas the R-selected person is behind a screen and behind a job application and getting the templated rejection email, you're probably going to get some face-to-face rejections and face-to-face feedback, which is great and can be very informative and powerful. But if you're not the kind of person who can handle that type of face-to-face disapproval and feedback, it can definitely be tough. So that's an overview of the two different paths that you can take in order to get from a high school degree to a six-figure salary. I've tested both of these. I got personally my six-figure salary going down the R-selected path, but I've also got an internship that I'm really excited about by going through the back door and emailing the CEO a cold email and explaining what I can offer now that I have all this job experience. And so I can say for a fact that both of these paths work. Regardless of which one you end up taking, I can offer some advice that is relevant across both. The first one is to look into smaller companies. Larger companies usually have more processes, more red tape, and they'll be less likely to break or bend the rules in order to hire somebody without a college degree. Whereas smaller companies, and by smaller I mean ideally 50 or fewer employees, but smaller is subjective. Smaller companies are usually more likely to get to know their employees, to invest in their employees more, and to have fewer rules surrounding their hiring process. So that's kind of my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice, and this should be pretty obvious, be prepared for rejection. Regardless of which path you go down, you are doing things differently. And I'm not saying that people with a college degree never get rejected. In fact, everybody gets rejected when they're going through the job application process. But it's definitely going to be harder if you're doing it differently and you don't have a college degree. So don't lose faith, you got this, but be prepared for other people to not understand or just be indoctrinated in their own personal beliefs about college, which you and I know not to be true. And the last thing is to constantly be trying to improve yourself, and when you feel comfortable, ask for feedback. So if you notice that a lot of the jobs that you want require a certain skill that you don't have, use your spare time to work on that skill and acquire that skill. So for example, a lot of entry-level tech jobs require some kind of data experience. So maybe you have to have some knowledge of Excel or SQL, that type of thing. And so if that's the job that you're looking for and you don't have SQL experience or Excel experience, maybe take an online class or watch some YouTube videos so that you can put that on your resume. All right, well, that was it for my thoughts on how to get to a six-figure salary starting from nothing. If you like this video, please subscribe and feel free to drop any questions in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to help. And as always, good luck out there.